Hello and welcome to the next video in the series of reviewing the financial planning and preparation for the startup of my business. This is the fourth video in the review of the financial plan and the fifth of this channel. Today we're going to be going over all of the supporting documents and information that gave the values that I have identified in the other sheets that we have already reviewed in our previous videos. And starting off with this one here, you can see that I've identified my first 3 years what my equipment costs are going to be in each one of those years. And if you've been following along, you know some of the backstory to the developments and my personnel and needs for each one of these years, and this is going to match exactly those needs. So off first, I really need a website. That is going to be the biggest asset to my marketing platform getting out there. A lot of my sales push is going to be word of mouth, face-to-face, meeting customers, pushing line cards, and then I want them to be able to fall back and review a website that gives greater clarification to my services and their need and interest in seeking that out. And the website is the best way for me to do that for them. And I have the costs associated with the development of that, as well as having a logo designed. And that graphic design is a service that's usually offered by website developers, or at least something that can be sourced by them. And that's an expense I'm expecting to incur. And I have business cards as well as part of my startup costs. Initially of $5,200. You may recognize that amount in my startup cost estimate, which was shown in my first video of this financial plan review. By year 2, I now have employees. Right, so I need to expense a laptop, and in order for the laptop to work for my purposes, I need software programs on that, and my employees are going to need more business cards. So those are expenses, equipment expenses that I'm expecting to incur in the second year in order to continue to grow my business, and that's going to be no different by year 3. Not only do I have more employees, which means I need more workstations, which includes a laptop, but by year 3, I'm hoping or anticipating to occupy an actual office space. So not only do I have rent and utility costs associated with that, but not only am I having laptops, but now desktop computers afforded for them in order to work for my company, be effective and productive. I need the software programs to support those as well. With an office, I would be needing a business copier. I am sure I would be using or pushing a lot of paper at this point in time that my own home printer would no longer be sufficient to meet the needs of. So my business would be expensing a business copier to support my office and more business cards as well. So again, you can see the expenses incurred just via equipment for the 3 years that I have projections for within my financial plan. Now, the next one that I have is probably the largest cost impact to my business at any stage of its development, and that's going to be planning for my employees and their salary impact on my business. Now, this is not any particular format that I've received from anybody or any recommendation. This is just something that I've put together myself that kind of made sense for me to lay out what that's going to be and what that impact's going to look like and how I can most appropriately plan for that. This also helps me budget for that, and I'll kind of give some explanation of that, and you can see that here. So at least within the first 5 years, I was originally looking at 5 years operating costs for a business, and I've identified what positions would be of need potentially within the first 5 years, and I have listed those here. Now, I have given an estimate as to what would be an initial starting salary for any one of those positions given its qualifications and things of that nature, right? What would be the market value for somebody who can accomplish the task of any of these positions identified here? I've broken that out, divided it by 12 to what would be approximately the monthly payroll expense incurred initially by any one of these positions. And for subsequent years, what would be my allotted budget increase for maintaining their employment, right? Employees don't typically stick around if you don't give them raises or any kind of monetary recognition for their services if it's due. And I need to plan accordingly in order that I can prepare that is going to be a reality of the cost of doing business off into the future. And so I've identified what my annual budget adjustment index would be for that. I've also identified what potentially their start rate would be based on the growth plan, right? The scalable metric of the growth of my business, when it is that these positions would be needed, or at least in addition to, and things of that nature. So I can identify at what years it is that I'm anticipating that their cost is going to be injected into my business and how the revenue would be impacted by their insertion into my business. So we're just going to be looking at the first 3 years for this right now. And the first one, year one, again, I don't have any employees. I'm outsourcing all of the labor that I cannot perform myself, and so I only have myself, and I'm not even paying myself. So I have a whopping salary budget of $0 for my first year, and I get to be the lonely president of a business making no money whatsoever. But you know my reasoning behind that and what the end goal is to that. You can see that in all the following years, we're just going to jump down here into year two, that I've also identified what the increases and differences are going to be in following years for my budget allotment. In year two, I'm still around and I'm still not making anything at all. I'm not adding that to the budget allotment, but I do have 2 new employees and I can't afford just not to pay them. I need a project estimator, which I'd be paying them somewhere in the ballpark of, I've just targeted $22.50 an hour, would be an appealing rate to get a qualified individual at that. And I also need an accountant to help with what I would hope and expect to be the increased volume of invoices being submitted, payment being received, filing that's necessary in order to run my business, given this is a part-time venture for me, in order to afford this, because I'm not even making anything at this just yet, right? So I do have a part-time employee at roughly $20 an hour, which equates to a $10,400 annual impact to that. So I have no salary increase from my budget from the previous year, since that was 0, which is demonstrated here. But since I do have new employees, and I've identified that, I'm going to be adding their annual budget or their annual salaries to the budget, which would not be reflected via an increase to existing employees from previous years. So they have a total cost impact of $57,200, and I've met that exactly because that's their first year of employment, and I'm still not paying myself. Now, those things will be changing in the third year. By year 3, as we've seen from my P&L statements and my growth projections, and from my balance sheet, I should be able to substantiate finally paying myself a salary. So I have deferred for 2 entire years of work and the $20,000 of personal funds to start up this business to finally start drawing a salary from this year, from this business in year 3, and that's shown here. But I've also rolled in from year 3 the employees that I have from year 2. You saw my projected salary increase of about 5% to my budget within those. So for their salary total of $57,200 and a 5% increase to that budget from the previous year, that's going to be taking that and adding the 5%, which is $6,360 to my budget. I also have new employees this year to the tune of $65,000 total annual impact, right? My design specialist, he's coming on this year. It's his first year, year 3 of my operation for $65,000 a year. And if you take all of that combined, I have a total annual budget of $208,960, which leaves me, I am $3,240 and 2% below my 5% increase with the addition of my new employees for that year's budget. So I am showing there in the green that I have met my budgetary restrictions. Because my budget is $208,960, it's only costing me $205,720, but I'm going to account for $208,960. Because if I'm budgeting for this amount, but I can prepare for this amount, I should be able to meet that as the hope. And you can see that I am building into projections of giving increases, annual increases to these employees, which is why I'm only 2% below a 5% increase. And in following years, as this staff continues and they add to my budget, identifying what that is, what that would look like, I'm projecting for years 4 and 5, continued pay increases for these employees at the same rate of increases from their predecessors in those same positions. They are adding to my budget. New employees are adding to the budget. The increases from existing employees are adding to my budget. And my scalable growth plan, my financial plan, should be able to substantiate these costs for my budgeted amount. And I just need to stay within that. This is not lowballing your employees. This is making sure you can afford for them. And there's a big difference to that. I am still recognizing them via pay increases in these years. And the biggest one is I'm deferring even receiving payment myself in spite of my time and monetary investment into starting this business for 2 entire years. So we're going to dovetail this into my business expense sheet. This, just like the last one, is not one that's necessarily been, this isn't industry recognized or anything that's been recommended. This is something I've come up with just by myself to try and identify what it is I'm going to incur cost-wise in any one of these particular areas, and I have a multitude of these that I've identified and broken out, but this is where I come up with the values that I have demonstrated in my profit and loss statements, and maybe in any way, shape, or form or capacity this will be of benefit to you. So again, year one's going to look decisively different than any of the following years because I'm not paying myself. I'm not a paid employee, and I don't have any of the residual benefit or costs associated with that, right? So I'm not paying myself Social Security, workers' comp, unemployment. I'm not carrying my own insurance or benefit package or anything. I'm just trying to make money, which I can't afford to pay myself anything at that point in time to do so. But I do have some startup costs that are still identified within this that are not shown in my equipment or personnel costs in years one. I still have to acquire my fictitious business name. That's not free, and I identified the cost of doing so right here. I still have to have my limited or my liability insurance in order to acquire my contractor's license, which is identified here. You may start to recognize a lot of these items and these costs that were demonstrated in my initial sheet, which is called my startup cost estimate. They're all coming from here. I have no benefits I'm paying myself, but I do have fees, license, and register cost expenses, and we're going to get into that in this following page is exactly what that is and what they're generated from. I'm not occupying a space, so I have no rent. I will have to expense fuel and transportation for sales and service providing. I have vehicle maintenance because of that. You can see I have no workers' comp or utility bills. I do have to pay for the domain hosting of my website. The website itself being showed as an equipment expense in my previous sheet, but I'm capturing the cost over here. No office supplies or payroll tax just yet, but I'm going to have to file taxes at the end of the year, and that's not going to be free. So I still do need an accountant for year one since I am generating revenue, doing business, and incurring expenses, and technically generating a profit. So you can see that I've identified that as a year total of $14,035 incurred in costs of business expenses. And those are going to increase in following years as I continue to grow my business and invest in different directions, mostly in employees, and by year 3, even occupying a space and incurring rent. So in the following years, things that are important to consider is what are the rates at which an employer has to expense Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, and workers' comp for their employees. So I've done a little bit of research, and I've identified at least currently Social Security rates are about 6.2%. Unemployment rates are 6.2%. Medicare rates are 1.5%. And workers' comp rates do vary for different employees in different positions. I'll clarify that if an employee is in what's considered a hazardous condition, like if they are out in the shop working, doing some kind of fabrication, handling machinery, if they're exposed to elements that could cause them harm, your workers' comp rate could double to 6%. But in a clerical setting, if they work in an office, things far removed from things that might at least immediately potentially endanger them, it'd be about 3%. And that is the case that I have proposed here as office workers is 3% for the purpose of my business. Now, employee benefits costs will differ whether the employee has family or not based on the coverage options that you have to offer. So I try and identify here probably how many of the employees that I'm going to be having are going to be maybe just covering themselves. Let's say they're single, or maybe they do have a spouse that has insurance and they're putting the entire family on that, and they're just trying to mitigate the cost by having themselves self-insured with their employer, things of that nature, versus how many people are going to have family plans. Because to the employer, there's a substantially higher cost associated with either one of those. And so I try to identify just potentially what that could be and identify what that is. Now, by year 2, I have one full-time employee. I'd be offering them insurance benefits and coverage, and I'm just going to plan that they have a family plan that's going to cost me about $1,000 in order to do so. I'm still not paying rent, therefore I'm not paying utilities yet. We're working remotely at this time, and I have those cost savings here and that I don't have any rent or utility bills. But my insurance has gone up substantially, right? I am now carrying insurance for my employee and for my business and things of that nature. There are fees associated with having insurance policies and stuff like that. I have calculated approximately what that would be for a single employee on a family plan, and I've incorporated that into here of about $13,701 a year total cost for insurance coverage. Benefits package for them based off of their salary, and so I will clarify insurance up here would be things of the nature of Social Security, unemployment rates, right? You can identify the change colors here. So what I'm trying to identify here is what I'm going to be paying percentage-wise in comparison to their salary. Hence, this is a percent of Social Security, unemployment, and Medicare rates. So you can see that just in this formula alone, it's identifying the employees that I have within this year, going back to this previous sheet, personnel and salary expenses, and multiplying that by the rates of employer payment for each one of these services, Medicare, unemployment, Social Security, and applying that to that annual cost. Benefits packages are what we were talking about up here with affording benefits to your employees, both personal and family plans for medical, dental, and vision insurance. Fees, licenses, and registers. I do still have costs associated with this, and the reasoning for that is the licensing that I would be acquiring just to start my business have reoccurring costs, different ones based on what they are. They reoccur at different rates and times, and they differ in their costs as well. Just off the top of my head, I know that my contractor's license would have to be renewed every 2 years. And so every 2 years, you'll see that cost increase in year 3, but not in year 2. But there are other ones that do occur on an annual basis, and they're demonstrated here in year 2 at $395. Fuel and transportation expenses have gone up substantially. In year 1, I had allotted $7,500 for that. In order to grow my business, I'm going to have to be out there a lot more, whether that's myself personally or empowering my employee to go out there and do some marketing for me, but it's going to be getting out and about. And even if that's just traveling to job sites, job locations, provide service, whatever that is, travel is going to be a very big part of my service that I'm providing. Not all of it can be done remotely or telecommuted. And so my expenses are going to increase in that regard, and I'm still going to have vehicle maintenance associated with doing that. My workers' comp that I'm now incurring, you'll notice that that was not part of this formula up here. It's not highlighted for my insurance. I'm just looking at Medicare, unemployment, and Social Security. But workers' comp is still a derivative of the salary expense for that person or employees and their totals. So I'm deferring back to what is my total expense salary within that year, multiply that by their worker comp rate, and that's something that's going to be incurred exclusively by the employer. So this is a cost that I'm going to be incurring at that rate, and I want to plan accordingly to cover that cost. I have domain hosting still. That's $100 annual fee in order to accomplish that. I do have office supplies that I am sure I'm going to need and utilize at this point in time. I've targeted about $1,000 budget in order to do that I'm preparing for. Payroll taxes is now a reality of having employees. That is 1.5% of the amount that you're processing. So that's, again, I'm taking the total salaries that I'm paying out via payroll and adding 1.5% to that, and that's going to be my payroll tax amount, and I have to file taxes yet again as a business at the end of this year. That gives me a second year-end total of $48,395 of business expenses. And in year 3, some things are going to change yet again because, again, now I am occupying a space, I'm paying rent, I'm paying utilities, and all of these costs that are associated with and derivatives of my salary expense are going to be going up higher because I am finally now able to afford to pay myself a salary as a return for my investment and hard work into starting this up. So with that being said, with the additional full-time employee by year number 3, I'm anticipating I'm going to have a second family plan that I'm going to be expensing. I am now paying rent at $1,500 a month. You will recognize that if you followed with my P&L statement video review, and utility bills of $500 a month. Again, that you'll recognize that. So my insurance costs, right, based off of these multipliers for Social Security, unemployment, Medicare have gone up a lot. I'm now bordering $35,000 mark. When I only had one full-time and one part-time employee in year 2, at those multipliers, I was paying less than 14 grand. But now I have myself, 2 full-time employees, and a part-time employee with increasing rates of pay, and I'm bordering on $35,000 for Social Security, unemployment, Medicare. This is something I want you guys to be aware of and plan for accordingly. This is not cheap. And it is something that is going to be an incurred cost of your business if you're planning to start one. Benefits package are going to be increasing because I have more employees. And my fees, license, and registers, you can see that increased cost is there. And again, as I had talked about before, I do have biannual subscriptions that are going to be due for different certifications and licenses that I'm going to be carrying. And they're shown in this category here. My total year's rent payment is $18,000, which is $1,500 a month. My fuel and transportation budget remains at $25,000. Vehicle maintenance is still the projection. My workers' comp is going to be going up because, much like the insurance allotment here, it is directly reflected off of the payroll expenses. And since I'm in addition to that, plus an entire another employee, plus more time of my part-time accounting clerk associate, it just continues to go up. That is the pain and reality of continuing to grow and do your business. My utility bills at $500 a month or $6,000 for the year. I am still paying for the domain hosting of my website of $100 a year. I have increased my office supply budget to $1,500. My payroll taxes clearly went up with the adjustments that we've already talked about already. I continue to need accounting services in order to process taxes on behalf of my business. And my total cost of business expenses in my third year has increased to $102,344. I hope this was somewhat helpful and enlightening to you in seeing the true cost and impact and preparation of some of these things, so you can see how rapidly they do in fact increase. And you can see that even in my P&L statements in the reduced gross profit margin, even though I have an increased revenue generated in my third year relative to my second year, because a lot of these changes, rent, paying myself, all of this up here, you can see just how drastic that impact is on the cost of doing business, and why it is it's taken me 2 years of deferred salary for myself personally and all of this work to reach a point to where I can even start paying myself. And I still have 16 months from a break-even point to my initial cash investment for the startup of this business. So I do have quite a hefty investment of time and funds until I start reaping any kind of reward from this, and it's going to take approximately into the third year until I start realizing that. And I want you guys to see this quite thoroughly, how it is that I've recognized and tried to plan and calculate for that, and doing so in whatever fashion that makes best sense to you, but make sure that you cover all of that. Now, some of the things that have not yet been completely explained in great detail, this is broken out quite greatly, and this is referenced in these 3 other sheets as to individual expenses in any one of those categories, and I have mentioned this, and I'll go over this quite briefly, but I do have an expense with filing my fictitious business name. I show what that is there. The actual filing fee is about $50, and I do have to post that in a newspaper for whatever reason, and that's going to cost me about $75 to do that for 4 weeks, which is a requirement. My application fee for my contractor's license is $330. You have to do a live scan in conjunction with your application fee for them to even process that, which is about $150 to be done. Your initial licensing fee, let's assume that I passed the test and I'm qualified to become licensed. Even after the whole processing and application fee, I now have to pay another $200 just to even receive that. Another requirement to receive that on top of liability insurance is I have to obtain a contractor's bond. I have to be personally bonded as the qualifier on that license, and to get that bond is going to cost me about $150 startup. Same with the bond of qualifying individual, which is another bond that needs to be required just in order for them to issue me my license, which is a $125 expense. So you can see just between that and obtaining the limited liability insurance, which is a $1 million policy minimum, this right here are all the expenses that I have incurred just to attempt to obtain to receive my contractor's license, totaling $1,705. So it is not cheap to start your own business and to be licensed, to be registered in any of these particular areas. And now you're starting to see the breakout as to why it is I have these high dollar targets for startup costs to do my business, because I'm recognizing these are objectives that I need to meet in order to do so, and there's a lot of costs associated with doing it. Following this, I have a supplemental license classification, which is an additional $150 to add to that for the actual website development, and including the graphic design of the logo. I have $150 allotted for the graphic design, $5,000 for the website, which we've discussed, and I have $100 first-time cost of hosting that of $100, which will continue in subsequent years that we've already identified. Business cards, about a $50 budget for the first year. Obtaining my business license in Butte County, which is where I'm located. It's going to cost me about $60 to file and obtain that. Now, just like being a licensed contractor for association with my clientele, I also want to be, it would be it would be a notch in my belt, be a feather in my hat. It'd be one of the things that qualifies the services that I'm trying to offer if I were to be a member of the American Society of Professional Estimators. And membership to any organization doesn't come free, and this is no exception to that. So that'd be a $295 initial expense for membership fee of the ASPE, and I believe that follows every year that I have to maintain that. To become a young professional member of the Design Build Institute of America is $100. And the older I get, the more expensive that gets, but I want to recognize that as well. That would be an important relative aspect to the business and service I'm trying to provide. And thankfully, to at least start the checking account in my business name doesn't cost anything, but I had funds in there anyways to start that. For following years, I have projected expenses for purchases of laptops, software programs, malware protection, extra storage devices, and I have renewal fees down here, $400 every 2 years for my contractor's license, the need to purchase QuickBooks, the copier, and office equipment, and you should be able to recognize these values and these items in some of these other expense categories that were demonstrated in these sheets that we reviewed today. I want to thank you guys for your time and sticking with me in this video series and reviewing this information, the financial plan, preparation for me to start my own business. I hope that there was something in this that you were able to learn or obtain or receive for perhaps the first time. If there's any lesson to be taken from this that I hope that you were able to identify, it is the importance of planning for, reviewing, and anticipating all of the expenses of starting and operating your business prior to actually initiating that move. I suggest that you take all the time and investigation that is necessary for you to try and review this information and these costs that apply to you and your particular business desire and its models, the market that you're going to serve. I hope that you were able to see and hear all of these prices, all of these numbers, and how they were applied to the different expense projections and categories that I have developed here, and how those were implemented into the business balance sheet and the profit and loss statements, and how ultimately I was able to use all of that information, what my growth projections were, to identify what truly my startup cost was, what my target is, right? Because going all the way back to the first sheet, I know what my startup costs were only through this investigative matter, but I also needed an allotment of working capital in order to qualify the operation of my business until it started to become self-sufficient, and only through this effort and this information was I able to identify what exactly that was. I also learned what my break-even point was, what my return on investment through the several years is going to be, and this is all information that you're going to want to know before you take the investment of your time and your life to try and pursue something. You want to be accurately prepared to do so. I hope this was of a benefit in helping you to do so. As always, if there are any questions or comments that you have, anything that you want to add to this or for me to know, or anything that you would like me to expound upon, please add that to the posting of this video. Please do subscribe. There's much more information to come that has to do with the total venture of the startup of my business, and I hope that as much as this, any aspect of it is beneficial, educational, enlightening to you. I do encourage your feedback, your pointers, your help. I'm not saying that I know any or all of this. I just want you to see how it is that I'm going to do this and whether that works or doesn't, for good or for better or for worse. Again, thank you for your time. Please do subscribe and stay tuned for the next video in this series.